thinking about what makes things go. You ever thought about what makes a car go? Fuel, air, spark, an explosion, and then mechanical bits and pieces go round and round, and then when the rubber meets the road, off we go.
How cool is it to be driving in a classic car? And as we drive through this world, don't we see some truly amazing things? And I reckon that we are actually wired to want to make sense of these things, to understand and be able to explain why stuff is and how it is. I remember this especially as a kid. Over and over, I would ask those why questions. Why does this do this and why does that do that? Questions like, why does this car not have a roof? I'm sure some of us drove our mum and dad really batty with all our why questions. But isn't it cool to see the inquiring minds of kids today? Isn't it cool that they have a real fascination about how things work and what makes them go? As we grow up, I wonder whether we actually lose some of that, fascination with the world. I wonder whether many of us have actually chosen not to think about like the bigger issues of life and questions of life. I can understand this because, well, life's hard. And often the things that happen to us in life can just leave our heads spinning with little capacity to actually think beyond just getting through the day. Just like you can pop the bonnet of a car to see what makes it go, I reckon it's important to pop the bonnet on life, to see what makes life go for us, what motivates us and what energises us. One of the essential bits of a car is the transmission. It's the box full of gears that transfers the motion of the engine to the drive shaft, which ultimately transmits the power to the wheels. And as you know, inside the car, there's a spot where you can move the gear stick where none of the power of the engine is transferred at all. It's neutral. And in neutral, no matter how much you rev the guts out of the engine, you go nowhere. But it sure sounds good. I reckon our brains are a bit like a car transmission. There's a whole lot of power and meaning to be experienced in life, but if we just choose to chuck our brains in neutral, then we may not have available to us the full meaning and purpose and traction intended for life. I believe in the God who's revealed in the Bible. And it's interesting, as a Christian, many people reckon that I've actually traded my brain in for my faith, as if I'm encouraged to just, believe blindly without thinking at all. Well, I believe that God gave me at least half a brain to exercise it. So having a crack at science and engineering degrees has actually challenged me to use the old grey matter. But I must say, a degree in theology or studying God has actually caused me to think more than ever. Being a believer in God has inspired me to shift my brain out of neutral and to engage in this incredibly complex world that we live in, to engage with what I reckon are the big questions of life. Some of those really big questions that people seem to wrestle with in life is, well, where did we come from? And what is the origin of all life? If we watch a doco, and we'll hear that the presenters are actually talking about what is known as the theory of evolution. And they're actually asserting that it provides an explanation for how life got started in the first place. So how do I, as a believer in God, actually deal with that? Well, I want to put my brain into gear and to actually, as a scientist, actually suss out what is there to say on this subject. In 1859, the English naturalist and geologist Charles Darwin was the first to formulate and publish a scientific argument for the theory of evolution by proposing a process called natural selection, whereby, given enough time, living organisms mutate to form more advanced organisms. Now, when he proposed this theory, some interpreted this explanation as an instrument of God's design. However, others thought that he had effectively killed God, replacing the Creator with natural processes. Here's a question for us to mull over. Do you reckon that it's really possible that life just spontaneously originated from non-living matter by random accidental combinations of chemicals? Do you think it's really possible for something just to appear out of nothing? You know, there are no reputable scientific papers explaining a proven mechanism for how living cells arise from non-living cells, a process called abiogenesis. On the other hand, there are plenty of published scientific findings that show that abiogenesis cannot happen at all. Well, here's another question for us. Do you reckon that we can really call evolution a scientific fact if, after even years of intense research with the latest technology, we have never observed living things mutating to form newer classes of more advanced living things? In other words, how can we get something really quite advanced by random, undirected forces without the influence of a designer? And secondly, how do we get the raw materials for these cool things in the first place? As we pop the bonnet on life, I just want to encourage you to engage your brain on this subject. Are we here as the result of accidental combinations of chemicals and mutations that sort of spontaneously appeared out of nothing? Or are we here on purpose, for a purpose? I reckon these are really important questions for all of us to get a handle on. Back in the 1800s, scientists thought that living cells were just made up of relatively simple particles. And it's one thing to think that relatively simple stuff could actually come from random accidental processes, but what we've learned in the last 50 years or so is that living cells are not simple at all. They are in fact mind-blowingly, amazingly complex. We marvel at the complexity of constructions like a car, especially this classic old beast. Of course, this car was created as a result of hundreds of engineers who contributed to designing the way it looks, the way it functions, and the way it's assembled. You know, I used to work 100 years ago as an engineer in a car assembly factory. And when we made the cars, we actually had instructions that described the materials you used, how many bolts, what sequence you tighten them in, how tight they are, etc. You know what? It seems to be the case with us. In each one of our 100 trillion cells in our bodies, there is DNA. Now, DNA is coded assembly language, which was only discovered just a few decades ago. But just like the instructions we had in the factory to build a car, DNA holds the instructions to assemble living organisms, like you and me. With the tools of science today, scientists can see that human DNA contains more organised information than all the 30 volumes of the Encyclopaedia Britannica. Now, of course, I'm not sure about you, but that is just amazing. And when I engage my brain on this subject, well, it hurts. The intricacy of DNA in our cells just yells out to me that we are designed, just like a car. We're not here by accident, we're here by design. To think that these incredibly complex DNA molecules actually formed by chance, well, that takes a lot of faith. Researchers have actually estimated the odds of just one of these DNA molecules evolving by chance is one chance in something like 10 to the power of 50. Now, that's the number 1 with 50 zeros after it. Now, with such a humongous number, that's just ridiculously low odds. It's effectively impossible. Now, researchers reckon that if we believe in these odds, we believe that a tornado can rip through a scrapyard like this, toss everything up in the air and, by itself, assemble a fully functional car. Yeah, right. I love looking through junk like this. Oh, here we go. Have you ever thought about our eyes recently? But the way they form just after conception is really freaky. The DNA code programs a baby's eye to begin growing about 1 million microscopic optic nerves. But at the same time, the DNA programs the brain to be growing 1 million optic nerves as well. Each one of these 1 million optic nerves must find and match up to its partner, or else the eye doesn't function perfectly. Just think of that. Keeping track of 1 million wires. That's just ridiculous. I struggle to unravel my headphone wires when they get tangled. How amazing is that? In order for the eye to function as per its design, each one of these nerves needs to find its exact match. Now, when I take my brain out of neutral with these scientific facts about our design, I have to ask myself, how can evolutionary, accidental, random processes produce such an awesomely complex organ such as our eye? Now, with the eye, you can't just sort of slowly build up to its final design. You can't say have like 500,000 wires connected and then evolve randomly to have 1 million wires connected. The eye just doesn't work unless all the parts are present and working on day one. If it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed, which could not possibly have been formed by numerous, successive, slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. Of course, our eyes aren't the only bits of equipment that us humans have that are just totally awesome. Take our heart, for example. The human heart is a fantastic piece of engineering. Often without maintenance, the human heart can beat something like 3 billion times in an average lifetime. Now, that's pumping enough blood to fill a fuel tank like this one around 50 times a day. Not sure about you, but as I put my brain into gear on these subjects, well, it's just exhausting. It seems pretty clear to me that we have been designed, not just formed by some mutations over a vast amount of time by some accident. It's no surprise that in the past few decades, thousands of scientists are actually admitting that the theory of evolution just doesn't cut it in explaining the initial origin of life. It just doesn't fit the facts. It's like some keys trying to fit them into a lock that they just weren't designed for. The theory just doesn't fit the facts. Now, amazing discoveries about the facts of design of our bodies and this incredible world that we're living in are being discovered every day. And these facts are not in themselves sort of sufficient to actually prove the existence of the Creator God in whom I have faith, but it is consistent with what the Bible describes about the God as the designer of life. Therefore, these facts actually affirm my faith. And I don't know about you, but the evidence for a designer for life is just all around us. I don't know about you, but I reckon the theory of evolution to explain how life originated in the first place should be given the boot. Those who believe in evolution are still trying to apply Darwin's 19th century thinking to a 21st century reality. Explanations from the era of the steamboat are just no longer adequate to explain the biological world of this mind-blowingly, fantastically amazing information age. When I think about what science is discovering every day about DNA and the intricacy of our complex bodies, I just want to thank God for his awesome design. I just want to worship him for creating us and bringing such purpose and meaning to our lives. It may not have smacked you in the face, but if we believe in a theory where life is actually based or has its foundations on accidents and randomness, there's a possibility that you might think that your life is actually just a series of random, accidental happenings that have no meaning or purpose. You may be struggling to feel valued in life or to value life itself. You may be struggling to find some, really cool goals that inspire you. You may be struggling with peace or feel like you've got no passion or vibrancy in life, or no sort of deep sense of joy as to why you're living the life you're living. I just want to encourage you, just want to encourage you to think about the possibility that life is full of design and purpose, that your life is full of design and purpose. I believe that you have been uniquely designed by a loving creator who just wants to give you life, wants to give you purpose, wants to give you hope. This is why I'm passionate about this stuff. I just want to encourage you that you are here on purpose, for a purpose. Let's put our mind into gear on this. Let's not be in neutral. Let's not say, oh yeah, whatever. Don't miss out on anything that God has got in store for you. It's alright to put your car in neutral, but don't put your brain there as well.